What's going on, New Canoe Nation, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another Unlimited podcast. Folks listening later on the podcast platforms, welcome as always. Got an exciting show for you guys tonight. Sorry we're a day late and 15 minutes late. Had some internet issues. I think we got the problem fixed. So it was worth the wait. We got some great guys in the house tonight. Brad Hurlebaus, Dave Palmer, both very avid waterfowl hunters. Dave's from Canada, Brad, Wisconsin. These guys have been hitting ducks and geese for quite a while, and we want to bring some of their knowledge into the podcast, how they utilize their new canoes for hunting. It's an ever-growing thing, right? A lot of folks are getting into our kayaks to access public land, public waters, to get deer, waterfowl, turkeys, you name it, it's there. The boats can handle it. So we're going to get these guys in here, hear how they utilize their boats out on the water, and kind of what they're doing right now. Season's right around the corner. We're about 15 days from like early goose, early teal season here in the north, and I know it's the same up in Canada. So let's get our guests of the hour in the house, Mr. Dave Palmer, Brad Hurlebaus. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hey, Brian,
buddy.
how's it going?
You guys are screwing with me now. These guys both have their own podcasts, talk hunting all the time, so they're screwing with me, and they're gonna give me one-word answers. So I like it. But let's get a little background on you both. We'll start with Dave, and then go to Brad. Like where you're from, what you do, how long you've been hunting out of the kayak, and whatnot.
Yeah, so Dave Palmer. I'm part of the Punisher Waterfowl team, co-owner of Punisher Waterfowl. We have a couple podcasts. We've got the Union 0430, and we've got just started a new one kind of called Duck U. And then we have the PMP podcast with our friend Jeff Coates. We just talk about anything and everything, tons of guests. When it comes to actually hunting out of my new canoe, I've had my new canoe for, this will be my 8th year with the new canoe, but I've only hunted with it for 3. And kind of the biggest way that I changed was I changed my mentality of like where the boat launch is to where's the closest access point. And as soon as I did that, it was just like, well, I could actually hunt directly out of this thing. And I bought the blind, and that's kind of where I got going with the hunting out of the new canoe itself. So
dig it.
Yeah.
Dig it. Brad?
Also a podcast host, like you mentioned. I'm part of the Paddle and Fin Network. I host the Feather and Fur, so the only hunting show. I'm unique. I like it. Like no one else steps on my toes. It's good. I've been hunting out of kayaks and canoes for, at least 10 years. Went to New Canoe about 3 years ago because I wanted something that gave me more versatility between tournament bass fishing and kayak hunting, and gives me the ability to run a motor because I run a 3 horsepower SPS Mini Swamp Runner on mine. Not that I'm against paddling, but I'm against paddling when it comes to hauling a couple bags of decoys and everything else around the marsh. I mean, she's not a rocket ship at 6 miles an hour, but she goes good enough where it's not a lot of work and I'm not sweating by the time I get there.
Yeah, amen to that, man. I'm looking forward to putting the EPS motor to work in the marsh, and I told Romel, get ready, because I'm going to run this thing through some nasty stuff. I'm going to probably break 8 props this fall, and whatever. But I've run it pretty hard in some really thick weeds and lily pads this year, and I've had 0 issues, so I'm stoked to give that a go. But I'm right there with you, man. I sent you a picture of 3 bags of decoys, and there's probably 5 dozen in there, or 4 dozen. And throwing those in the kayak plus some ammo and a shotgun and all your other gear, it could get a little wrist breaking, so to speak, when you're paddling, for sure.
Yeah, the mud motor definitely helps, especially when you're like because you think waterfowl, like at least where I hunt in my kayak, like Dave said, I'm not launching from boat launches. I'm launching from the side of the roads. I'm launching from smaller access points, things that I can't, because I also have a big boat too. But my new canoe comes really into play for those smaller, hard to reach access areas where the birds want to be. Like that's where I really use my new canoe, and that mud motor, because it's between the two, I can still ditch launch on the side of the road. And then I don't have to worry about trying to paddle through all that slop, the thick weeds, the lily pads, all that stuff with every paddle stroke that gets hung up. And I don't like throwing that around constantly because I get soaking wet. So when I'm paddling through pads, you'll see me like there's pads on the paddle. I'm shaking it off every paddle stroke. Like I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you. But I mean, not to steer anybody away or necessarily say you need a motor, but I mean, like I've had conversations with Matt Gibson before, and he's like, dude, I've shot plenty of ducks over a half dozen decoys in my new canoe. You know, like you don't necessarily have to do the huge spread and stuff like that in certain scenarios, obviously, but you know, it's a nice, unique way to get out there or get ahead of the big boats, right? You know, being able to launch right off the side of the road, which is huge.
The other big advantage I find to the new canoe compared to my big boat is the profile, right? So Wisconsin's open water hunting law says your boat has to be hidden from you have to be within 3 feet of natural vegetation. And the hunter and the boat needs to be hidden from 50% from one side. I think it's 50%, if I remember correctly. That takes a lot for a 16-foot boat, but my new canoe, I can hunt what would be considered open water from my big boat. I'm 100% legal in my new canoe, where other big boats can't hunt those areas. So it opens up different pockets, different opportunities in the middle of watersheds where I can be in that kayak. I can be super hunkered down in that layout blind from new canoe. And I'm basically open water hunting, but I'm legal because I'm in such a low profile small boat.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like we talk about access ways that we can get our new canoes in, but just like you said there, like when there's very little cover, you can get your new canoe hidden pretty good, and that because of the low profile, you can get it hidden really well, right? So that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing I've noticed hunting with Brad quite a bit is, you know, trying to hide that boat versus trying to hide the kayaks. A whole lot easier with the kayaks.
Mm-hmm.
especially in that thinner marsh water at 4:30 in the morning on the last day of season. Just saying. But
yeah, I'm not the one that wore fishing waders, stocking foot waders with wading boots, and the boat got stuck. I mean, that wasn't my choice of equipment. I mean, I'll admit I got the boat stuck and I got it stuck, but it wasn't my fault. You kept losing your boot.
This is true. This is true.
This sounds like you guys need counseling.
Seriously, dude. Seriously. That's why we brought you in tonight, Dave, so you could counsel between the two of us and tell us we're both wrong and all that good stuff. But
we were looking for a good mediator from the Great White North.
Yeah. I'm more of an instigator. Like, yeah, you know what, Brad, you're right, but Brian, you're right too.
Let's see where this goes.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, season's right around the corner, man, and I did some driving around scouting tonight and just looking at a couple different spots that I like to watch as we come into season. So, you know, I know, Dave, this season's a little different for you because you're kind of suffering from or recuperating from a broken shoulder or collarbone. And Brad, I know you've been out doing some scouting, things like that. So let's start with you, Dave. Like, what are you doing to get ready for the season? And, you know, maybe some tips and tricks that you like to share with folks on what to do to get prepared for opening day.
Yeah. So just like you were saying, this year's pretty different. I'm not doing anything right now. Other than
what would you be doing?
What would I be doing right now? I'm actually, the thing that I'm doing the same as what I would normally do is I'm looking at all the normal roost locations, loaf locations, and hunting locations, and I'm seeing what's changed. Like one of the big spots we have here it's called Bay. That's just what it's called. We call it Bay. It's Bay de Door. But they went through a couple weeks ago and did the Phragmite. They cut all the Phragmites out. So now that they've done that, I got to go in and see what it looks like. So take the binoculars, have a look, see what the location's like, see what my launch is like, see what everything's like for that. So I'm kind of scouting, like a preseason scout, I guess you could say. That's the biggest thing I'm doing.
What is a Phragmite?
It's like a big, tall weed that spreads. It's great for having hide, like you can hide, but they take over pretty quickly, and they're just a bad weed, I guess. So.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify for those that may not know.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot of scouting, looking at maps, checking.
Not so much because I know my area pretty well. I know where normal, but I'm kind of checking the roost and just seeing, how are they doing this year? Are there birds there this year? Right. There's one right behind my house, so I kind of go back when I walk the dog every night. I walk by it and just see what's going on and see if the birds are coming in yet. And just like I'm saying, like water levels might have changed, right? So
sure,
checking all that stuff out. Some people might do it earlier for that kind of stuff, but I tend to do it as close to season as possible because things like them cutting the Phragmites out that was a big deal to me. Is just seeing what happened there. So.
Sure. Well, I mean, that gives ducks cover to hide in, or around, so to speak, to blend in with the environment, right? So that's a huge changer for them, right?
Yeah, but more so that when they went in there with equipment to cut this stuff out, a few years ago when they did that, it kind of changed what the marsh looked like itself.
Okay.
So I looked at it before they actually cut it all out, and I was like, okay, I know what's going on here. I don't need to come back till season. And then when season came around, it's like, oh, my landmarks are different. Everything's different. So
interesting.
Just checking everything out.
Right on. Brad?
Focused on water levels.
Water's
still low by us. Different areas are navigatable. Some areas are no longer navigatable. I went and walked into a WMA last night, waterfowl management area. For those that don't know, I went and walked in one, and the whole back side of it is dry. Like the front side, found a bunch of ducks. No teal, unfortunately, for our early season, but I definitely did find a bunch of wood ducks, which was exciting and disappointing all at the same time because I thought they were teal driving by, and I go and get up there and park and pull up the binoculars, and I'm like, bunch of clown birds. That ain't going to help me on September 1st. But that's part of it, though. Like, really, I'm looking for water levels. I'm looking for birds in a combination of the two, because areas that I've hunted in the past, you can't access right now. Like, it's just too low.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed driving around this evening in southern Wisconsin was some of the spots that I normally check on. Like, there was one area where it was almost completely dry. There was a little bit of water in there still, but it's definitely interesting, right? And not only that, I mean, come 2 weeks from now, September 1st, it's probably going to look very similar, but September 1st to the beginning or end of September, when this actual full season opens, that whole terrain is going to look a lot different. Trees are going to start dropping leaves, grass is going to start to lay down and things like that. And it's just going to be a whole different world, it seems like.
It always changes. I mean, every year is slightly different. You have your common roosts. I mean, there's some areas that I have when they flood out, they're amazing. It's like hunting flooded timber with wood ducks. It's incredible. And I have other areas when everything turns to a drought that I can access with a kayak that big boats can't, that the ducks just all funnel to because it's what's left for open water.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
No, I just think I'm pretty spoiled here, like living right near Lake Huron, that we got that big water level. So when we don't really get what you're kind of seeing there. So,
you are very spoiled. I didn't want to point that out, but now that you brought it up, we're going to continue to punch in on that fact. Let's speaking of you being spoiled in Canada with some issues. I heard
allegedly spoiled.
I heard some rumor about Canada's not letting visitors take any ducks out of the state because of avian flu. Is that right?
I think he got it backwards. I think the Americans can't take the duck meat back with them.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Americans.
But hold on. But like, I can't believe you didn't correct this, Dave. Brian, Canada's not a state; it's a country.
Whatever. Seems different.
Yeah.
The neighbors to the north.
We're the America's attic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
perfect.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that from now on.
Yeah.
So and I think when we had you on the New Canoe podcast earlier, like you talked about that a little bit, that there is it avian flu, is that right, or is it bird flu, or what? Same.
Yeah, the avian flu. It's. I heard there's rumblings about it. There's talks about it. I haven't seen anything here. Brad, you might know more. Have you seen any or heard anything about it?
I've heard nothing more than we're not allowed to bring birds back for meat or trophy this year from Canada, that they won't let them pass the border. I haven't dug too hard or too deep into it yet to see like how prevalent it is. Is it up in the tundra? Like, where is it super prevalent?
Yeah.
So I don't know much about it when it comes to the scientific side, to be honest. I just know that they closed the transportation of birds.
Yeah.
Or I heard they have. I'm not going to Canada this year. I haven't truly researched it. This is word of mouth that I've heard.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I
think I'm kind of in the same. Sorry.
I heard something about Canada was putting up nets at the border so the birds couldn't fly over the border.
Yeah. The Arrive Can app. Right. I don't want to get
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I didn't know. I didn't know if you knew more about it just because you're from up there, and I think it's interesting, right? That, 2 years ago, we had a huge thing that I forget exactly what it was that wiped out a bunch of deer population here in the Midwest.
Is that CWD?
No, it wasn't CWD. It was something else. It was like a flu type deal. And deer were getting sick, overheating, and passing away. So, just something, interesting. What about?
I'd like to say that it's probably Americans are more prevalent coming up into Canada to hunt than Canadians going down to America to hunt.
Yeah,
might have something to do with it too, right? But,
sure.
Yeah,
sure.
Like Brad was saying, like I haven't looked into the science behind it. I don't know any of that side, right?
I wonder if it's flipped. Like if a Canadian came down to hunt in the States in like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, something like that, would they be able to bring ducks back to Canada?
I haven't heard anything.
Interesting.
Sorry. Yeah.
Well, this podcast is over. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, that was the only question you had, right?
Interview over. Done.
Yeah. So.
What else are you guys doing to get ready? Like going through gear,
always, man.
Trap shooting, things like that. Like, talk about that.
I'll go through all my gear. So I'll change all the fluids in the motor. I'll go through my kayak. I'll rip it all apart, take it out of fishing mode, put it back into hunting mode. I run my blind. I have pre-grassed. So I use blind grass. It's a synthetic material. And then on top of that, I will use natural vegetation. So any natural vegetation I've had on there still from last year, I'll rip all that off. I'll clean it up. I'll apply any more actual base level grass I might need. I'll order more before the season starts. I'll get my blind in tip top shape, and I'll just really go through all my gear. I'll clean my decoys. I'll go through my calls, make sure I use my calls all year, but in years where I haven't, I'll go through my calls. I'll make sure the reeds are solid. I'll do any tuning to my calls. I'll get my lungs back working again and all that type of stuff, and really just prep for the entire season. And that's all on top of just continual dog training.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave. Go.
And yeah, getting those decoys, getting all the gear out, just pulling it all out of the shed, whether it's the early season stuff, that's exactly it. Like making sure the mice haven't chewed a hole in something, or,
your layout blind isn't covered in mold because you put it away wet last December.
Yeah. Right. So checking the batteries on your spinners, and that's
a good reminder. That's one thing I did not do today. I got to check those.
To even go more specific, check the battery in the remote on your spinners, because I've had that die, and that's just a frustrating experience.
Yeah, got to go back out and flip it to the one instead of the two.
Right on, man. Well, what about like practicing shooting? Do either of you guys practice shooting a little bit in the off season, like some clay pigeons, something like that?
I like to do clay pigeons just as a fun thing to do. This year for the last month and a half, I haven't been able to, but I enjoy shooting clay pigeons. So yeah, the other thing that I like to do is kind of pattern the gun again, just see where it's shooting, remind myself, make sure you know what's going on. It's just a day to get out with the kids too, to get them shooting their guns and getting ready for it. So yeah.
So patterning a gun, if somebody's new out there, they're thinking about getting into duck hunting, what does that mean? Like patterning a shotgun?
Well, when you're shooting your shotgun, you've got the pellets inside of your shell, right?
Sure.
And when those pellets come out, they're going to have a pattern on the paper. So take your 30 yard, 40 yard, whatever your typical distance is, and you're going to put a mark on that piece of paper, take a shot at it, and then you're going to see kind of where your gun's shooting, what it looks like, what the spread is. Make sure it's kind of concentrated for your range and your distance, right?
Sure.
Yeah, just make sure that you're kind of hitting on target. And for the kids, it's kind of making sure that they're not jumping the gun and pulling and all that stuff too, right? So making sure you're shooting right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one thing too. I know we talked about in a previous podcast with you is you're a huge advocate for teaching some youngsters on, etiquette and how to do things right, which is super cool. It's huge. It needs to be done more. I feel, it's some of that tradition is getting lost, so to speak. But maybe for somebody that's got a kid and they're thinking about getting them into it, they're getting to that age. Any tips or pointers for those folks?
For just getting them out or like actually
just
hunting?
Getting them started. Yeah.
You know what, man? The biggest thing is don't be frustrated. Don't be, if they're scared, if they're whatever it is, just let it be. Just have fun with it. It's an experience, right? Go out there and enjoy it with them, right? That they might miss a chip shot and just laugh with them about it. Make sure that they feel good so they want to come back the next day, right?
Sure.
Too many of them are like, I don't want to go back out again, right? If they're cold, you've only been out for an hour and they say, hey, I'm cold. Be like, okay, well, do you want to put on another jacket? If they want to go, like, just know that experience is for the kid. It's not for you, right? If that makes sense. That's the way I look at it. Yeah.
So you should remember that next time we go hunting, Brad. The experience is for the kid. I'm the kid.
Does that mean Brad, your dad?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
Of all the times we've been out, let's be honest, I only lost my cool once. And that was another situation where the river decided to drop and the boat was stuck. And we had geese. We were on the X and we had a goose we hammered geese on the first flock.
There was twice. There was that time. The second time was when you couldn't hit a woody 10 yards in front of you.
That was pretty frustrating too. Yeah, that was a pretty frustrating hunt. You know what really helped me shoot better is taking the camera off the front of my gun. Like night and day difference. Like that forward weight really screwed with me.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible to see the difference. It was night and day. From when you would had that thing on and to when you took it off, and your whole swing and just shooting accuracy like went through the roof once you took that damn camera off.
I mean, it was night and day difference to the point where I'll never put one back on the front of my gun. I'll use different camera angles now.
Sure.
But for the first half of the season, I was struggling. I'm like, man, like normally I shoot clays decent. Normally I'm a decent shot. I wouldn't say I'm great, but normally I'm decent. And I just kept missing birds. And I went back to patterning my gun, checking all that stuff out, everything else. And finally I just stripped that camera off the gun and I'm like, where's this been all my life? Like I forgot what it's like just to shoot without, and it made such a huge difference.
Sure. And that was a little Tacticam. What's that thing weigh? 6 ounces, if that?
Yeah, it's not heavy. but it was enough to throw off my swing. And I don't know, it could have been slightly mental because I was trying to get it on film. So maybe odds are I probably wasn't following through in my shot to begin with. That's a big one. Probably didn't have my head down. That's normal. But like I took that camera off and I started to hit shots that I used to hit, and like consistently, I'm like, this isn't a coincidence.
Sure. Well, I mean, that's one of the things, and that's why I bring up like getting out, practicing shooting a little bit, and just making sure your gun is functioning properly, patterning it like you guys say, and just being ready for when it's actual real time, real go time, being prepped and ready to go. It's the same thing with like shooting a bow, archery, like practice, because, when it comes time and you got a big old buck standing in front of you or something like that, you don't want to miss, So it's just one of those things. I always preach practice and, shooting, especially when you're talking about taking an animal, you know what I mean? But I'm not going to preach. But
get off your podium.
I am. I'm down. I'm back down here.
Brad talked about it. Brad talked about it too, like checking your calls and making sure they're okay. Like you're checking, making sure, blow it again, make sure it's going right. Checking to make sure your reads are okay. Checking to make sure your cork isn't all screwed up, right? Just do a little maintenance on your calls too. That was a good one.
Yeah.
On top of that, blow them. Like get back in the practice. It's a music. Like think about a call as a musical instrument. Like it takes practice. It takes repetition. There's coordination. There's hand and mouth movement and your tongue and back pressure and everything else. Like it's a big harmony of everything. And if you just don't blow your calls for an entire year and you pick them up, like you're not going to be as good as you used to be because you just don't have that practice anymore. You don't have that muscle memory.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting when I got into duck hunting, Brad brought up a good point, he was like, when you're driving around, you drive around a ton for work, just blow your car or blow your call in your truck while you're driving around. And I've been doing that quite a bit lately, and I'm the worst caller on the face of the planet, but someday I'll get my stuff straightened out, but that's just it. Like the more you use it, the better off you're going to be, I agree with you 100%. It's exactly like a musical instrument, and having that tuned in and, ready to roll, makes a huge difference.
And if you're nervous about calling, or if you don't think you're a good caller, don't call. Like it's that simple. I mean, if you're on the X and if you did your due diligence scouting and you're where the birds want to be, there's been plenty of hunts. I just leave my calls basically in my blind bag. Like I'll still have them around my neck and maybe I'll blow them here and there. But for the most part, if you're where the birds want to be and you have a realistic decoy spread out, like if you saw like a handful of birds on the water, maybe don't throw 4 dozen decoys, maybe throw half a dozen. Or there's times where I will just overload a hole intentionally. Like it really depends on the scenario. But if you put the time in scouting and you're where the birds want to be, you can really minimum and have amazing results.
Sure. See, and that's something that we've said. I like to say, like, before you even buy a duck call, you should buy a good set of binoculars. Because you can scout a hunt, but you can't call a hunt, if that kind of comes out across, right? Like,
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So if you have a good set of binoculars and you can find where those birds are, you can still have a good hunt, right? But if there's no birds in the area, you're not going to be able to call them because they're not there to hear you, right?
Right. Yeah. You're just calling into the wind.
Yeah, 100%. So,
calling into the guy like 4 spots down that just didn't
is calling back to you
either. Yeah. Yeah, you guys can call to each other. That works out great.
I mean, that's one thing I learned early on in waterfowl. Like I would give up days I could hunt to spend the time scouting if the birds had moved to ensure my next hunt would be a good hunt. Like hunting over water that has no birds, like, there's an experience there. And if you're with the right people, it can still be an amazing time. It's not just about killing birds, but we're out there to hunt ducks. We're out there to see ducks. We're out there to like have ducks work our spreads and everything else, give our dogs retrieves. And if you keep hunting water because there had been birds there and there's no longer birds there, the birds aren't just going to magically appear. Like you got to go out, you got to find the birds again. And I've given up a Saturday morning of hunting to go scout different marshes to see where the birds are, then go hunt them Saturday, and had phenomenal hunts where if I'd have just dumped the kayak or the boat back in the water Saturday to hunt a spot that didn't have birds, I never would have found that good hunt on Sunday.
Sure.
And it makes you feel really weird when you do that, eh? Like, man, I want to hunt every single day possible. Well, give up one day to have a great hunt the next day. The first few times that I did it, I was just like, man, this feels weird that I'm actually not hunting today. I'm just trying to find more birds. But yeah, just like you said, it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's huge, man. That's one thing I've learned, just doing the due diligence to do your homework and see where these birds are, coming in to rest or, coming in to roost or whatever it may be. Like, just doing your due diligence, like I know last year for Southern Opener, me and Brad went out. It was a rough morning, and I don't think you scouted that at all, did you, Brad?
I don't even remember where we went. So
Wisconsin
no, you're right.
River.
Nope, I know where we went. Yep, I remember that. There was birds in the area, but I didn't have anything better. We probably should have just skipped it and scouted, to be honest. I mean, it was opening morning. I'm like, we'll give it a shot. There's some birds in the area, but I never really locked down a good hunt for that day, to be honest.
Right. Well, and we left that, and I did some driving around on my way home, and I found a wood duck hole that's pretty killer, and produced for a couple of weeks too. So I mean, that's just it. Like we didn't. All right, let's go back out tonight. And I ended up finding that little spot, and you came down, and that was the second time I've ever seen you get really frustrated. But just doing that due diligence and making sure that, you got an area that's legit holding birds instead of like, oh, they're in the general area, So,
yeah, speaking of due diligence, like another thing you can do for preseason prep, if you haven't done it before, get out one of those duck identification books. At the very least, look up what a grebe is so that I don't have to see posts like, what kind of duck is this? You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
What's a grebe?
Not a duck.
A federally protected bird.
It's
something very illegal.
Yeah. Don't shoot it. Yeah. So
that's like shooting your tundra swan thinking it's a snow goose. It's just as bad.
Yeah.
Every year you get one or two posts online of like a grebe, like, hey, what kind of duck is this? Take that post down, bud.
Yeah.
It's not a duck. Yeah.
Bounty hunters are coming for you.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing early season too, that people don't stress enough, I feel, especially when you have these early teal seasons, like that's going to start here in Wisconsin on September 1st. Identify your ducks. Like on wing, it can be hard to, especially this time of year. Colors are super washed out. Birds aren't starting to pop by any means yet. Woodies and teal can look awfully similar. I mean, make sure you're hunting birds that you're supposed to be hunting. I mean, if you got to land them in your decoys to make sure, then land them in your decoys. I know guys that use binoculars in early season that are, when birds are circling, they're looking at them in binoculars. And if the birds get a weird reflection and they might flare, so be it. It's better than piling on a bunch of wood duck that shouldn't have been shot this time of year. Like, do your diligence and make sure that you're shooting like proper birds.
Yeah, not only that, but to add on to that, regulations are changing ever so often, and go through, read that regs book along with your duck identification, and make sure what's right and what's wrong. You know what I mean? Because some of those fines, man, could be pretty hefty.
Know your limit.
Yeah. That's a huge one too, right? Yeah. You're only allowed certain number of certain species every day and things like that, So, yeah.
The other thing that people should be looking at too is, I never thought of this before until I was listening to one of your podcasts. There's, if I go to travel with my new canoe and I come down to the States, like look up the regulations for having your new canoe or your boat or wherever you are.
Sure.
So that's something that I never thought of.
Yeah, and every state's different too, in the actual United States, and I'm sure it's the same way with somebody in the States coming up to Canada, know those regulations. Last thing you want to do is leave your new canoe at the border, come back and go ahead.
I was gonna say, on top of that, not only regulations, like be conscious of invasive species. I feel like that's really focused on the fishing side of the world, making sure your boat's clean, not dragging vegetation everywhere. I feel like there's a big lack in that in the waterfowl side of the world, where there's not a big focus anymore of making sure your stuff is clean. And that goes for decoys and waders and everything. Like, there's a lot of invasive species out there that we can help stop the spread of if we just take a minute to clean our gear occasionally.
Yeah. That's a great point, man. Like, I was going through the decoys today, and I was switching out some stuff, some hardware on them, and there was weeds on one, so I bagged it up, threw it in the garbage, and that was from the last hunt of last year. It was just lazy, went straight back to deer hunting. I was like, yep, these can go in the basement. See you next fall, but yeah, that's a great point, dude. It is something that I think is overlooked in the hunting side of things versus, fishermen are super focused on that, and especially in many states. Like, I think it's Minnesota. You have to have a pre-inspection done before you can even launch your boat in some of their waters, correct? Brad?
I have heard that. I've been on lakes in Wisconsin where they inspect your boat before entering or after leaving.
Yeah.
Depending on what's in, like, you got that stony, whatever it is, zebra mussels and all that other stuff. But
sure,
that stony, I can't remember what it's called. I know that's a bad one. That's a real bad one. And lakes that have that, a lot of times they'll have a checkpoint set up front where they'll inspect your boat before you launch or after you leave to make sure it's clean.
Sure. And a lot of places too now are putting in like washes, like Lake Delavan right over the border from me in Wisconsin. They got a hose out there you could spray down. They got brushes you could scrub your boat and trailer down and things like that, man. Like, that's huge. It's definitely huge, especially when you're talking about potentially hurting another body of water that you love to fish, that'd be like me bringing something home to the home lake here, and then, that fishery goes to crap because I'm an idiot and I didn't clean my boat. I'd be devastated, so.
I mean, we can definitely play a part. I mean, there's some things we'll never, like when you've got geese jumping from pond to pond, I mean, and everything else. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, native animals can spread stuff too, but we can all do our part to help control it.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's wind this down, boys. Like, final thoughts and plug your socials and stuff like that, man. We'll, and your both of your podcast. Dave, we'll start with you, my man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And if you guys want to watch us, we're on all the major social media platforms for Punisher Waterfowl, for all the podcast platforms, the Union 0430 podcast. And yeah, give us a watch. Let us know what you think. We're always interactive. So
love it. Love it. Bradley.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the host of the Feather and Fur podcast. You can find me on the Paddle and Fin channel, Instagram, Feather and Fur, one word, _podcast. My social is with WI_fishing_hunting on Instagram, Brad Hurlebaus on Facebook. Give me a follow. I mean, pretty much talk a lot of hunting, all hunting, dogs, dog training specific episodes, a lot of upland hunting, deer hunting, good mix of everything.
I like it. Boys. I appreciate your time tonight, your knowledge. Wish you both successful seasons out on the water. Dave, I hope you actually get on the water and get something done, bro.
It'll be a lot of camera work.
It'll be a lot of camera work.
Yeah. Not shooting the gun, shooting the camera. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
Hey, man, that's just as cool sometimes, you can get some pretty epic photos for sure. But hope you heal up quick, man, and you at least get some of the season in.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate that.
Appreciate you guys. Guys, gals, listening, watching. We're here every Tuesday night I know tonight's Wednesday. We pushed back a day, but typically here every Tuesday night, 7 Central, 8 Eastern, 5 o'clock out on the West Coast. As soon as this gets done, we upload it to all the major podcast platforms. You can go check that out. You could also check us out on Waypoint TV. And we just appreciate you guys being here. Hope you guys that are thinking about getting into doing some hunting out of your kayaks, please do it. If you got any questions, any three of us here would be more than happy to answer those questions. And if we don't know the answer, we probably know somebody that does. So, yeah, feel free to reach out. Those of you that are getting out there hunting this season, be safe, shoot straight, and just have a great time. Like Dave said, you know, remember just to enjoy it, you know, get a kid out there if you can, and just be safe. So we will see you guys next week as usual. I feel like saying tight line, smooth paddling is a little off because we're not talking fishing. So
we can go with Vine, man.
Yeah.
Straight.
No.
You're gonna change it up. He's gonna go like he's gonna do this live. He's gonna do it live.
Yeah. Straight shooting, smooth paddling. Peace.